薄いのアホ。
プリズムパワーメイクアップオーカードレディー。
Welcome to Shojo Tell, where we discuss shoujo manga and tell who's hot and who's not, talk about themes, and just generally geek out. Today, November 3rd, 2024, we'll be shoujo telling about the second half of Mars by Fuyumi Soryo. So that's a little confusing. It's actually volumes 9 through 15, and then we're going to include the prequel story, which is called A Horse with No Name. I'm your host, Ashley McDonald, and I'm joined once again by Lucy, one of the co-hosts of the CLAMPcast and Wonderland podcast. Hello, Lucy.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so last time I know we discussed that maybe Robin could also join us, but we were not able to make that happen because Robin is so cool and busy.
Yeah, we tried really hard, but she's got a series of kind of like events almost every other weekend, it seems, like between personal events and a lot of like she's an illustrator, so she sells at conventions and stuff. So she is just slammed with like fall market type stuff. So it just
she draws lots of spooky stuff too. It's like her season, right? Like...
Yeah. This is totally her vibe. So.
Yeah. Once we get to winter, no more. But
she does winter stuff too. But this is very much like her time to shine. So she is very busy.
Okay. And she has a new book out, right?
Yeah, she illustrated a book called Goth Parenting. I'm forgetting the author's name, but it's very cute. It's very much for like kind of alternative parents and like the struggles of having a child. And I got to go to like a book signing that she and the author did, and very cute, very helpful, even if you're like me and like you don't have a kid, but you've like, see friends go through the parenting stuff. And yeah, I would recommend
that would be my category.
Yeah.
All right, well, I love that. Well, Lucy, in case other people are just listening to the second episode, do you want to say anything more about yourself as well?
Well, you kind of covered it. I co-host CLAMPcast and Wonderland. We're a podcast where we are rereading all of the works of Clamp, kind of starting with Rig Veda and then going through to whatever they're currently working on by the time we get to it, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. There's the rub.
Yeah. So we update about once a month at this point, and you can follow us on all of your podcatchers if you wish.
Yes, put CLAMPcast in your podcatchers. It is definitely one of my favorite podcasts.
Aww.
Although it's hard. It becomes easier as I read more things by Clamp for my own podcast, but then some of them I'm like, I haven't read it yet. I can't spoil me. So I got like episodes piled up in there.
Oh yeah, that happens to me with yours too, where I'm like, oh, I want to reread that first. Oh, I want to read that at all first. Oh,
yeah. Classic struggle of geeky things.
Yeah.
All right, so before we get into this, I want to stress that this is about the second half of a series, so it's going to be spoilers all the way down, okay? So if you have not read Mars, maybe you don't want to listen to this episode. Maybe we'll listen to the first episode where we have a little spoiler-free discussion about it, and you can assess, or just start with that episode generally. I don't know. Or you just love talking about the meat of a story, and you're here, and that's fine. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Okay, so we're here. Spoiler warning. It's not my fault. Legally, I am not obligated to do anything else. We're here now. Okay, so just to set us back in where we were in the story, picking up from. So at the end of the last volume we read, volume 8, it seemed like Kira and Rei were going to break up. So they have this little period where they're broken up because Kira has chosen to stay with her mom and her stepdad had raped her before, and Rei does not respect this decision and lashes out and is like, no, we need to break up if you're going to be like this. So we've kind of like we're picking up in the middle of that tension point of whether they should really break up or not, and like kind of trying to assess how dangerous or not Kira's stepfather is Rei just being an asshole blatantly, like that's what we're exploring right now. So yeah, so I think this time we're going to kind of try to go through it by overarching story arcs, because there's basically 3. So yeah, we're in the middle of this one. And how did you feel about it, Lucy?
Oh God, it was a little frustrating. I kind of had to keep reminding myself that they were like teenagers having big emotions about stuff. But like, it was just very fresh. Like, I get where Rei's coming from. His point of view is kind of like, it's crazy for you to stay with this clearly dangerous man. I can't watch you go through this. So if this is the decision, I can't be part of your life for it.
Yeah.
And that was hard because like, while I get that, it felt very victim blamey to me, like blaming her for staying because like she doesn't see a clear out and she kind of wants to, support her mom and stuff.
Yeah, she wants to support her mom. She's not being like, oh, I love my stepdaddy or something.
Yeah. Yeah, she's not choosing her stepdad over him. She's choosing her mom debatably over him.
Yeah. I wouldn't say like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of she's choosing like wanting to have this semblance of a normal life, even though, I would not recommend her do that. But
no.
But like people stay in abusive relationships for lots of reasons that like you can't really blame them for. Like I felt icky about his reaction, but I also do understand that he's frustrated by her putting herself in danger for what he sees as no real reason.
Yeah, he has like a multi-layered response that we get more into as the story progresses and she goes back to him and all these things. Like he explains that he's like, I both feel like I can't protect her, like I don't like respect the decision of her choosing somebody else over me. They've been having these sexual encounters and tension between themselves, and he's just like, I am a very sexy man who has had a lot of sex already. And Kira just looks at these interactions like, I can't get any closer to her because she thinks that these romantic lovey-dovey or physical things are just violence. Mm-hmm. And that one for me actually like resonated more from a like, I don't know. I look at something like Kimi ni Todoke and I think it's all about like how close you can get to a person before it like spirals out of like just how close can you get to a person. And so like that one resonated for me, but like overall, in the moment, you're just like, Rei, you're being like, you're not being helpful for sure.
Yeah. Like there's a lot to be said about like, yes, the levels of, intimacy that are possible do matter. Like that is an important part of a relationship. He's not wrong for being like, if we can't have this intimacy that, really matters to me, maybe we're not a good fit. But it comes off a lot like, oh, your trauma makes it difficult for us to have sex. It's so inconvenient. Like, and I do think part of it is just that he's, again, kind of a stupid teenager who hasn't really like had to articulate this stuff before. And so he's struggling and processing. And I mean, the whole story is about them all being messy and complicated. So like this fits very well in with all that.
Yeah. But then they do like she does eventually be like, okay, she has an encounter with her stepfather because her stepfather, perhaps even more than Rei is like, you can't hang out with Rei because he's a dangerous motorcycle boy or whatever, right? Like,
yeah,
he can't take you from me. And you're just like, oh, that's nasty, right?
Yeah, I thought there was an interesting escalation where, like, obviously you don't like this guy going in because we know that he raped her at least once, and you're not gonna like him. But, like, he starts out acting like he's really trying to protect her and change his ways and make up for things, and then just gets progressively more and more controlling and more, like, physical with her. Although he doesn't get to the, assault point really again, but he gets, like, close enough that it triggers her and close enough that's not appropriate, especially given their background together.
No.
And he just gets more and more like controlling, and it kind of culminates in him acting as if like the fact that he raped her means that he cares for her in like a romantic way, and she should too. And it was just
it got really icky, but like not overtly, as you said. It was actually pretty. It was like he would grab her wrist or something and she would have an adverse reaction, and he starts saying all these like mildly creepy things, but again, on the surface you can't necessarily be like it's overtly sexual or romantic or something, right?
Yeah.
And so they have that tension point. I do like that she clocked him with a actual clock. That was fun.
Yeah, that was good.
I was like, go get it, Kira. You were named Kira all along for a reason, you little killer. You're just trying to kill this man, huh? I know you, like, go for it. But so after she thinks that she's kind of like, I think it was after she thinks she murders her stepfather, she goes back to Rei and is like, I love you. And they spend like half a volume naked getting it on, which they never do again. And I think that really encompasses my problem with the back half's pacing. And I think it was going a little off the rails in the last arc we had read in the first half of like with Maso, you know, but just like, this is a really big tension point for them. It gets this overblown like sexual encounter scene basically, and then it like never comes up again.
Yeah, that was weird. Like I thought that the sex scene was, I thought, good. Like it was, you kind of got that it meant, it meant what it meant to the characters, and like it was kind of paced well, so you sort of understood that they were going through this, and like that was good. But then he makes a joke that they're going to do it all the time, and we never even get an indication that they're doing it like off screen or anything ever again. Even
like, when they get to live, like they live together all the time, or like they get to go to his dad's house and they have like a big fancy bedroom. Like, no, there's no, they get married. Like, there's no implication that this happens again. It's just like, I don't know, like that's really weird. And I just felt like it really, started to be indicative of like, this came off as like a very fun kind of intelligent soap opera initially, but then like it starts to go really off the rails and things, and especially in the next arc, like it's just like, okay, you can only have so many people have this like mental illness before it gets like really wild, or like there's only so many times Rei can get in a fight and like I plausibly deny any consequences from it,
Yeah, that was really my feeling with the second half. Like I almost wrote in our little doc for notes just like, I'm very tired.
Yes. That sounds right.
Because I think every like the whole series is different, like discovering different levels of trauma that the characters and the side characters have undergone, and like learning about how that currently affects them. And each of them, I think, is done well individually, but like we kind of mentioned in the last episode, the amount of things that have happened concurrently to these characters is so overblown that I'm like, okay, I can't buy this. Like, this is just too much. Like, you have actually like jumped the shark and gone into a level where I can't actually like process more of this happening to the characters.
Yes, and I feel like, okay, the next arc is like really that, but there is a condensed section of this arc in particular where I'm just like, what is this section of events? Like, as you wrote in this, the other problematic thing about Rei's like response is when she starts to live with him, she basically just becomes a housewife who does like just cleans and goes grocery shopping. And like, he's like, you can't work, babe. But she's also like not doing her art. And it's just really weird. But then when she does get a job, she suffers job harassment. They have like some kind of failed date where they go to see factory lights like as a Christmas tree in the summer. And you're like, what? That's really weird. He like proposes to her. They go skinny dipping in the school pool with their friends. And it's just like, what is happening? Like, what is the pacing of this?
Yeah, and like that part where she's first kind of run away and is living there, I forgot that it was summer break or something, so I was like, are you just not going to school? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, no, they were just off for the summer, but like Rei's working all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know, more than anything, it just upset me that, she wasn't like taking that time to make art. you know?
You think she'd at least get a sketchbook or something, even if she doesn't have access to her supplies anymore, and like, it really bothered me that he didn't point that out to like, hey honey, you're not doing this thing that seems to be your like driving life force normally. But also he just kept harping on the fact that she couldn't work, and I was like, dude, what do you expect her to do? She's gonna be an adult in like a year, just like you. What do you think she's gonna do? Like, even if she goes to school, she will likely get a part-time job. What is wrong with you? Why don't you think she can handle like a normal ass job? Like, she is not a wilting flower. That just, I mean, she is, so granted, she is very like not good at people.
She is a wilting flower, but
she's not a wilting flower. She is very shy. Like, I do agree that like service industry is probably not like her ideal job, but like,
no,
I know plenty of people who've done that who are very introverted. Like, it just felt so infantilizing that he just kept being like, she can't work, she's too fragile. And I was like, dude.
Yeah.
Stop. I mean, eventually he does get to that point to be like, oh, I should support her. But even when he's supporting her, it feels a little like he's like supporting her because he feels he should, but he doesn't actually believe that she'll do well.
No, yeah. He doesn't feel it in his heart, you know, like it's not there.
Especially because she's so excited. She's like really happy to have a part-time job with her friend, and like she totally does okay with it, even though she gets sexually harassed and they do like nothing about it. And I mean, as in her employer does nothing about it. Rei like goes all angry boyfriend.
They're like, why does it matter that you got touched a little bit? It's not a big deal. And I was like, wow, we are really playing all the like 90s hits here, you know?
Yeah, there was a lot of that too, where I'm like, I do believe that I'm sure happens, and I'm sure happened more at the time, hopefully than it happens now, but it just got a little tiring.
It was very tiring, yeah. I think the other thing that might be part of the 90s hits here is that we did get a drag queen or trans character introduction here who really felt just more like a plot device, right? Like to give Kira clothes in this moment where she ran away from home and has nothing, you know?
Yeah, it felt so like frustrating because she seemed like an interesting character. She's like Rei's upstairs neighbor or something. She gives Kira clothes, but we have to spend the entire time having Rei be icked out that she's a man, and she herself keeps doing this thing where she like flashes Kira to traumatize her, and it's just very of the era, like and I mean the character is overall like we're supposed to think positively of her, like Kira and her get along and stuff, but it felt like, and you're right, she was just a plot device. We don't know where she goes after they leave that apartment complex. I guess spoilers for the next section, but like we don't see her after her like small window of usefulness.
Yeah. And like it's kind of weird because they have a whole like rapport with her in those couple of chapters, and like, you know, but it's really just her like giving Kira clothes, warning Kira about, you know, the railing being rusty and possibly falling off the roof, because what is Rei good for except to make characters fall off roofs?
And she gives the exposition that like the building's gonna get torn down in a year, which is why the rent's cheap. Like they really just felt like it was a character just to kind of use, and like they really just are very vague about who she is. Like she says that she's a woman, and I don't know if that was supposed to be a joke, but it sounded like the character was serious. But then they act as if she's just like a drag queen who's doing it for, you know, their job.
Yeah.
And Rei is clearly just like a homophobic asshole.
Yeah. Like we never see this character not be in what presumably is the drag for their job, which makes them seem more like a trans character. But then like, because she does be like, no, I'm still a man, flash you know, it's like, what is happening here? Like, which way are we going, you know?
Yeah, it was really, I think, ham-fisted and unnecessary. Like, they could have just had a, you know, upstairs neighbor who lent her clothes, and we could have just not had to know personal details about this lady. Like,
right? Like, why did she have to be trans? Like, what's
like,
because it's so rough. It's rough, so like only men can live there, but she needs an excuse.
Yeah, or maybe there can't be.
It's all like excuses on top of excuses, you know? Like it's just like I need all these devices to align.
Yeah. Well, I think if she'd been like a heavy quotes for the time real woman, then she would have been a threat to Rei. And so I think maybe they couldn't just have him have a female neighbor.
Sexy neighbor.
Yeah, because it would have been too, you know, too much of a threat. I mean, if they treated Masao as a threat because he was maybe gay, even though Rei wasn't into it, like, I don't know. It was just messy and unnecessary. And like, if they introduced her and then actually like made her club a like place they went or something that became like a new hangout or like something, or gave us insight into Rei's character or relationship with his neighbors or something, but like it kind of just goes nowhere. She's just there to kind of like serve some purposes and then keep going.
Yeah, and it's just like, wow. And again, that's where you can see it kind of like falling off the rails, where it's like, oh, I put myself into this corner and now I just like have to logic my way out of it plot wise, and you're like, what?
Yeah. Also, it made me wonder, like, how is he that homophobic if he has this neighbor he's been, like, he apparently knows pretty well? Like, why is he such an
I don't
asshole?
know. A lot of people seem to treat Ray as like, you know, everything that he does on the surface is not how he truly feels, right? So like he seems like a bad boy racer, but really he has a heart of gold. And so like I feel like any homophobic statements he makes are just like, he doesn't really mean it. He's going to be nice to them either way, and that's fine, you know?
Yeah, and I mean that's definitely what they're doing with his character. But I mean, there's a point where like your actions speak louder than words, and so if you keep being a dick, you are just kind of a dick.
What? Lucy?
Controversial statement. I realize.
Controversial statement. You think that if you just keep getting into fights, you should maybe get into law enforcement consequences?
Oh,
I don't
God.
know. I don't know about that.
Oh.
So I think that that's really everything that happens in that arc. We get some really dark implications about like Rei and Kira, you know, like almost killing her stepdad, and some more, I guess, perhaps like insightful things about like the frustration of them being so young. And so like law enforcement would believe, you know, this respectable older man who raped his stepdaughter over the two of them who are young. And, you know, Ray has been in trouble with the law, but not in any serious manner. But they think of him, you know, as a troublemaker and like all these things. And they're just like griping about those kinds of things, which does kind of lead us to our next arc, because Ray winds up having to ask his dad, who is not his biological father, for help, because his dad has that sweet I'm a big corporate man power.
Yes, he does.
So would you like to tell people about what goes down in this arc vaguely?
It's just very much like, oh, you fell in love with the bad boy that no one thought would amount to anything, but secretly he's the heir to a huge, powerful company.
Of course.
Possibly the most powerful company, because everybody's like crazy impressed everywhere they go. And yes, he has to kind of like sacrifice some things to get his dad to help get him and Kira kind of out of this mess. And like his dad kind of just lends this respectability to like talk to the school and kind of threaten / bribe her stepdad by way of business machinations to get him to like not push back against Kira living with Ray at his dad's house. And yeah, he kind of just swoops in and does all this thing. And of course the stipulation is that Ray has to follow in his footsteps and join the company instead of being a motorcycle racer, which of course is his lifelong dream. And there's this whole tension about how he doesn't tell Kira that, and so she has to find that out and like
by seeing him in suits and be like, why are you just like that?
Yeah, well, it takes a while for her to realize, like, she kind of understands that he is focusing on that, but it takes far too long for anyone to say that was a requirement of this lifestyle.
Yeah. Do you see this house? It doesn't come by wearing racetrack suits.
Yeah. And it was a lot. And then this arc just kind of, this is sort of what you were talking about, where it spirals real quickly.
it like, we didn't need, it was so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it goes from, they have to live with his dad. His dad's not really his dad. In fact, his biological father was his dad's brother, who was obviously having an affair with his mom, who it turns out is not the angelic, nice lady we thought she was, maybe. I don't remember how much we'd known about her, but she's very pretty, so we are led to believe she's kind.
We knew that she did try to kill them, I think, but like that seemed like an anomaly.
Oh, okay.
In Ray's, like he was confused about it as a memory, I think.
Yeah. If we didn't know it, we do now. We do pretty quickly.
We sure do.
That apparently his mom was also very troubled and tried to like strangle him. And like, in fact, she didn't die of leukemia, as he remembers. She, hung herself, and like his brother and him discovered her. And like that kind of leads us to then learn more about his dead brother, Sei, who it turns out did leave a suicide note that Kira finds. And there's all the tension of her not telling Rei about that. And then there's like this parallel tension of the reason his actual biological father is dead is he was a car racer
Too much.
And got in an accident on the racetrack or whatever. So he knew that he died in a car accident, but not what kind of car accident. Yeah, it's a lot in like 2 volumes or something.
Yeah, like maximum 3 volumes. And
Yeah.
it's like, what? And it just felt like we didn't need all that. It was just too much. Like, I think my biggest problem with this arc, actually, is that I can't imagine being Rei's dad/uncle, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I think there's a piece missing for me here where I'm like, well, why did he marry this chick?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we never really got information about what relationship he thought he had with his wife prior. I assumed her going kind of crazy. Like, I don't know. How did we get here? I was kind of hoping, not to jump ahead, but I was kind of hoping Horse with No Name would be like about her maybe or something, or them. And because I think that would have been a really interesting prequel, is to see like his dad or either of his dads really in their youth meeting his mom, so that we kind of had like context for how this came about. Like, was it kind of like him and Sei and Shiori, where it was like ongoing tension between all of them, or like what was happening?
Yeah. Because to me, it just doesn't, like, his dad doesn't come off as a believable character to some degree. Like, he's the nicest one here, but you're just like, how do you, everyone in your life was mentally very unstable. 2 people very close to you died by suicide. And it's just like, what?
Yeah.
It's too much.
And he still stayed very flat as a character. Like, we got lots of people telling us about him, and we through him got to see like flashbacks of things that had happened, but we didn't get a lot of much about him, except maybe for this sense that like he had kind of almost blindly followed in like their dad's footsteps instead of kind of having his own personality, really, like his brother had. And so he kind of sees that free spirit in Rei and like identifies it with his brother, and also is maybe jealous of it, but
it's also scared of it because your dad died by crashing, you know?
Yeah, and so we never really go past that. I mean, maybe this is one of the, you know, dangers of reading this type of story when you're in your 30s instead of when you're 17. Like, you're interested in the parents also. But I would have liked to know just a little bit more about him.
I really just think that, again, he felt like he was there to exposition all of this wild stuff that had happened in the past, but he seems largely unaffected by it. And I know that, you know, we wrote later in these notes that one of the like themes of the manga is about like everybody having this darkness in their hearts, but like for him it's very tame, despite having been around all this really horrific things that should have traumatized him, regardless of whether, I don't know, it didn't add up. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's partially because the kind of like twist you weren't expecting was that his dad actually was a good guy and wasn't this evil guy who was out to get him. Right. But it still feels like he wasn't giving him the right amount of like love and like attention and stuff that he clearly needed. And I do kind of wish he just left them in America with like their aunt or whatever.
With the aunt and uncle who were like, we want to adopt one of them anyway. What does he care? They're not, you know, related with something we learned through like Sei's suicide note flashback or something.
Yeah, the progression of Sei as a character is one of those things I was just like, I'm tired. I'm so tired by this point. Like, he was a good boy. No, he was a traumatized boy. No, he was a dark boy. No, he was actually, you know, trying to get Rei to follow him into death.
Yeah, like, at some point, you know, because the overall tension, certainly of the first half, was like, why did Sei commit suicide? And will that answer devastate Rei? And it's like, I mean, I guess it will, or maybe it won't, because Sei ended up being, the reasons that Sei gave in this note were like, he was basically the really, really evil one, and he had all these dark thoughts and like violence in his heart, but he was just too cowardly kind of to like implement it. But then he used that kind of weak perception of him to manipulate Rei into enacting all the dark thoughts that he ever had. And it's just like, what?
Yeah, which is a lot of parallels to Masao, and like they're trying to make parallels. Well, they were, or especially early on, making parallels between Kira and Sei. So it's like it's very confusing, and like I don't know. Like I just felt like it was too many spirals down after a while.
Too many, like way too far. And then like Kira gets lost in all of this again, you know? Like the whole the preceding arc had been like all about Kira's trauma and like getting over it and getting out of it. And then it just doesn't balance that well in this arc either. And you're just like, what? Okay. Yeah, and just the overall portrayal of the mental health, like how mental health works and mental health treatment doesn't make a lot of sense in this. Like, some implications that it's genetic. Also, every doctor in this, I mean, I understand that it is not set in America and they have different standards in Japan, but like committing just like flagrant HIPAA violations, you know, by our standards. And like, I don't think in Japan you could just be like, call up a mental institution and be like, hey, so how's Masao doing? Who's unrelated to me, and have them just be like, oh yeah, we totally released him today and here's why. Like, no. Like, what?
Yeah, that was a little wild. Like, I kind of buy it in that like the individual doctors or whatever might kind of break that rule to give Rei like information about his mother. Like it might not be legal or ethical, but like you kind of see that that's like the only way he'd get there. But yeah, the rampant just like, oh yes, you've asked about this person, we will give you all their information. And I'm like, that's not
over
safe.
the phone, you know?
Yeah, that's not, you can't just do that. What? I mean, I don't know what the laws are in Japan, but I suspect that you also can't just do that.
I'm just like, I don't know the specific like laws they have and what they're called, but I'm pretty sure you can't just do this.
Yeah.
To a degree, I also thought like the law enforcement responses were a little sus, but I don't know. I guess I've had more, unfortunately, I think I've had more interactions, or like not direct interactions, but somewhat enmeshed in other law enforcement responses in America where I'm like, I actually kind of believe that. You know?
Yeah, that like, again, it's like individually I can definitely see it, like it just goes badly sometimes, but it was those ones where they just like could call up somewhere and be given this information. Yeah. And I was like, I don't think that makes sense.
I don't think that is going to do it. Yeah, so the real piece, again, missing for me from this arc was definitely like, how did the mom even get here and get so bad? You know, like that connection just didn't fully make sense to me. Because, as you said, like his uncle / dad ends up being a perfectly fine person, like with his flaws, because all parents have flaws, and like he's coming with trauma, he's trying to deal with it too. But like, given all of the inputs, I was like, he was pretty good.
Yeah, and like it didn't even seem we were supposed to believe that his mother had like a break from reality when like her lover died. Like I would have believed that, but like she seemed to already be unwell at that point. Like she goes to like where they see the body and she like doesn't seem to comprehend what's happening in a way that like could be shock, but felt like it was more than shock. That was more just kind of how she was already. And so I'm like, what happened to this character? Like how did we get here? Like what's happening? Why are they together? Like what about this? You know, was it some sort of arranged marriage? Like
that's what I'm like, that would make sense. But like it's never mentioned. If they had just mentioned that in passing, I'd be like, okay, cool. Like she's some, you know, daughter of some other business mogul or scion or whatever. Like fine, but it's literally never mentioned that I recall. And I was like, what? Like, was this a love marriage? Does this make any sense?
It would have been really interesting if they had actually gotten married really young before they really knew each other. And like, that was yet another like touch point against, you know, Rei and Kira getting married. Like his dad also had issues because like he and his wife got married really young before they, you know, knew how incompatible they were or whatever. Like they could have used that in another like shot against them or whatever, but we don't know how they came together or anything really.
Yeah, and then it's just like, oh, yeah, she loved, you know, his brother, and it's like, okay. Should have seen that one coming for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is definitely the arc where the spiraling like mental health issues and the way that they are like implied to be genetic to a degree, or like certainly cyclic, but not fully explored as such or given like the weight of that, where I just thought it really went from like intelligent soap opera to just like, no, this is just a soap opera.
Yeah.
You know? Like in the same way I can see that with Grey's Anatomy. It's also just like, again, the number of times, yeah, you do a thing. Like in Grey's Anatomy, I feel like in these more recent seasons, you're like, okay, so whatever, Meredith's been shot like 3 times and like been in like 4 different plane crashes. And you're just like, you can't, like, that's not a real person's life, you know? Like,
Yeah.
that's just a comedy. Like,
yeah, like I'm all for exploring the actual like harsh things that people go through. That's fine, but like they don't stack like this ever, really.
No, I'm like, I feel like I'm a person with fairly bad luck in a lot of these regards, you know? Like, I'm like, I did have 2 brain surgeries and all these things, but yeah, I'm just like, no, that's not exactly how it stacks, you know?
Yeah, and like individually it's very interesting, but like when the same character has had like 5 traumas that aren't even related, and I'm kind of just like, how did you even have time in your life to have this much stuff happen?
Yeah, it's like Say was like 14 when they died by suicide.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like it's one of those things where you almost become numb to it in the series because they've raised the stakes so high and not had any really downtime that like by the 5th traumatic thing you're just like, that fits. Where's my, tracker for suicide attempts in the series?
Yeah, like where's the roof tracker? Where's the people fall off a roof or people die in a car accident tracker because it's high, both.
Yeah. We remember like the first volume when there was that art student who tried to jump off the roof and you're like, no, a lot.
It's so much. Like we only have 3 ways of going here and like we've used them all 5 times. Like it's really something.
Yeah.
Because like Kira's dad also died in a car accident, like just a straight up car accident.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that the fact that characters have dead parents is like the least traumatic part of any of this.
Oh yeah. No, for sure. That's not the traumatic part. No. And I think that this, so going into this final like Maso arc, because he had to come back for some reason. I don't know.
Apparently.
Like to bring this to, a very obvious point. Like there's one point where so Maso had been in the mental institution and, just fakes his way out of there basically. Like it's like people are really manipulated if I just cry. So okay, I've just learned how to fake emotions, So he busts himself out of there for whatever reason, just to go mess with Rei and Kira some more. So Rei decides to have like a lunch with Maso to be like, what's up, bro? Like, why are you here? How did you get out? Like, what do you want? But they're like sitting there and overhearing a table of teenagers who are like, the way to get famous is to murder someone. And it's just like it feels very real, actually. Maybe that statement is realer to Americans, at least, in the year our Lord 2024, with our like rampant gun issues and mass murders and everything like this. But like to just hear it stated like that, it's like, what? Like, how did we get here? That's really wild. I don't think that's how this works necessarily.
Yeah, that was a really wild, like, aside that they have. The whole stuff with Masao just felt a little like, do we need to be doing this?
Yeah, we really did. It was just like, we didn't need to bust him out of jail. Like, we didn't have to, He was in jail, basically.
He didn't have to come back. Like, we'd moved on. Other things have happened. Like, I feel like Sei's suicide note was enough of a like return to the early volumes of
Right?
stuff that we didn't also need this.
We did not need this last arc. So yeah, so this is going concurrently with Rei getting back into racing, even though it had been a stipulation with his dad that he wouldn't race anymore and he would take over the company. But it becomes very clear that that is just not going to work out. And that, you know, we're like taming Rei is making him like a sad boy and he's not himself and all these things. But also he just doesn't know how to speak business to all these people. And okay, I am not gonna lie, I actually think his dad was very smart at the end. Okay, so concurrently also Rei did propose to Kira and they are trying to actively like plan out how to get married when Rei turns 18 and like have all the legal parties be like fine with it, you know. Because she's still underage. So like I actually thought that Rei's dad's suggestion that they should have kids, but then give him the kid, I was like, that's pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
That's a good plan. I'm fine with that. But no, we had to. So the day that Rei turns 8, so we have all this, again, built up trauma too. I'm just going to go back to the racing thing for a second. Like we have all this, like everybody's died in a car crash. Like cars are bad. Okay, that's what we learn. Everybody take the train. Like whatever. So we're like we see, and then Rei is trying to doing like a practice race circuit test on a motorcycle, and he's trying to break the racing record, and he gets into a scary little. He loses control by trying to go too fast and flips over the handlebars and like gets bruises, you know, on his shoulder blades basically, and a concussion. And I do think that it's very indicative of the times that, again, we do not live in current America with concussions and football, but they were just like, oh, he just got a concussion, he's good, you know. Like,
yeah.
Oh, okay, he just has permanent brain damage, that's fine.
Yeah, that one got me too, and I was like, well, I guess as opposed to being dead or like have all his limbs broken or something, like, but still.
They're like, he has a shot at being normal for a long time. Okay, I was like, okay, cool. So like we have all this trauma. I think that's fine. There's enough tension there. We could have focused on his career, but instead, and like getting married, and he turns 18, they get the marriage license. Everybody's excited. So everybody is at, you know, his crappy apartment to celebrate with Kira. They give her this nice lace that they get to pretend is a veil and all this stuff. So they're waiting for him to come home. But he's had this big falling out with Masao at that lunch where like Rei is just like, I pity you, my little friend. You know, like, like really condescending in a way that he's not wrong. It's just not, is it helpful? No.
Yeah. It's like, do we need to do this to a clearly unwell person? Like,
yeah, like why are you goading him on purpose in a not useful way? Anyway, so Maso is like, how dare you have basically insulted me? Like, I am not weak like you think I am. And Maso ends up stabbing Rei repeatedly, I believe on his birthday, like when they got the marriage license.
Yeah, I think it's all the same day. I got
a little loosey-goosey.
Yeah, and they kept saying he was 18 when he wasn't, and then being like, when he turns 18. And I was like, what? I thought you just said
where am I?
What's happening?
Where am I and what time is it?
Yeah.
A lot of that happening. And so then it's like, is Rei gonna live? Because he just got stabbed. Like all his organs have little holes in them now.
Yeah.
And we get that tension. And then, of course, he's fine. I mean, fine is a word to use. He is not dead.
Yes.
He somehow goes back to racing. We get a nice little thing of, 1 year later, you know, they're happily married. Yay. The end? Question? Like, it was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. Like, I could have just done without that. Like, I thought that the racetrack was enough of a climax of, like, we think he's gonna die and he just has a concussion. Like, I thought that was enough. We didn't need the stabbing. But
we did not need the stabbing.
We got it. Like, I think if they really wanted to bring Masao back, they could have just had Rei see him at the psychiatric place and have an interaction that shows that Rei has clearly moved beyond where he was when they originally met. And
right,
like,
because that's the real thing, right?
That's
like,
the interesting part, is that, you know, Rei's not that person anymore, and maybe wasn't even at the time that Masao really wanted him to be this, like, pure, you know, violent thing, the god of war, everything. But yeah, I don't know that we needed all that. It was good dramatic, you know, catharsis or something, but by that point I really just was tired. So tired.
Yeah, I was like, I would have been cool, you know, with an ending that was like, yeah, he races, it's a little bit dangerous, but it brings him joy, and like Kira's found peace with it, and his dad has found peace with it, and we just go from there, you know, like we didn't need this.
Yeah, I was much more interested in the like pursuing of their dreams, because one of the things that we didn't mention, because it's so minor compared to all of the trauma that they're dealing with, is that Rei also dropped out of school, and then Kira was going to drop out of school, and so part of their going back to his dad was making it so she could graduate and then be supported going to college for art school. And so like that I thought was kind of more interesting. Like I wanted more of that, where like him going back to racing and her, you know, embracing art school and like art as a career, not just a passion. And like that was all really interesting to me, but unfortunately it was kind of drowned out by everything else. And like I just wanted to see, like, we do wrap around to the end with like her giving the painting of Rei to his dad, and like clearly she's doing, you know, she's in art school and we see sketches and stuff, but like I wish there had been kind of more of that throughout. Like I really missed that connection to her art that brought them together too. So like it wasn't like a minor part of her character. I really would have liked it to have stayed firm.
Yeah, I think what was missing from that is definitely like, again, the big art piece that we get in the end is the one from the beginning, and we haven't seen her progress with art a lot. Even with this Maso thing of like him wanting Rei to be, you know, the god of war, Mars, which the series is named after, like that's not overtly stated at this ending part. Like we don't wrap it around like that even, and it's just like, what?
Yeah, I kind of wish she'd done like a new portrait of him where he was like a different god of something, like to kind of show that he's not, or he was a different version of the god or something, like wrap it around to be like, you were this kind of just chaotic, violent thing when we met, and you know, and I was this kind of like shut in,
this different version of Mars that we've gotten to now. Yeah,
it would have been cool to kind of see that visually. I mean, we get like a sketch of him and his dad from behind that kind of, I guess, does that, but like, I don't know. To me, that would have been, to me, it would have been better to have like, I can give away this painting because it's not you anymore or something. Like, I don't know, come back around to drawing him and stuff. I mean, they kept mentioning like Sei's self-portraits and what those meant, and like his art in general, what that meant, and then we didn't really wrap around to like what her art meant to
I was
her.
Like, I don't even feel like we wrapped up what that all meant with Sei, because there was that debate about like, oh, was he painting himself or was he painting Rei? But I thought Kira had determined that he was in fact painting Rei.
Yeah,
but like, what does it matter? Like, we don't get the weight of like, who cares? You know, like,
speaking of things that I wish a prequel had done instead, I would have liked kind of more of that too, like more of Sei. But I don't know. I've already slightly forgotten what the prequel even was, so we'll get to it and then I'll remember. But it kind of got like, it didn't super leave an impression, even though it was the most recent part of the story that I read.
Yeah, that sounds right. Well, just to touch on some other thematic things that kind of brought up, like that, I don't know that it necessarily landed, you know, but I thought were interesting was like, you know, it was exploring this idea of like, who has the right to live or die. And, you know, it was like, well, the morally correct answer is that anything that is living has the right to live. But all of these characters are struggling with that because they're giving worth to other people, and they're like, other people do bad things, or like other creatures do bad things, you know? So like, I am correct and I should murder them, but then, you know, you get into the struggle of it. But if you murder them, doesn't that make you bad? You know, like then we get into a real spiral. And it was tying that into these career aspirations that I don't think it ever fully really tied back, right? Like, because it was like, what is worth living or dying for. We get the implication that Rei is like, it is worth, like, I would die for racing because it's one of the few things that makes me happy. I would also die for Kira. And normally when you introduce that, I guess it did this implicitly, right? It's like, when you introduce that, you're like, but you should live for those things. And that's what he chooses to do. And, you know, yeah, you wrote down like this kind of idea of like, do what you love and everything. But it's just like, I don't think it quite really tied those things together or like made them make sense.
Yeah, and like we did have an interesting parallel you kind of just reminded me of, where in the beginning, like the first volume, when Kira's being bullied because Rei is showing interest in her, she has this line about like, well, if you break my hand, I'll write with my other hand. If you break that hand, I'll figure out how to write with my toes or my mouth or something. Like, and so that is really cool, but they didn't bring that back, or that passion back, when we were like dealing with the parallel. Like, I like that he has racing and she has art, but they kind of forgot about art, except when it was like her except attached to like education, and they didn't really connect it to her passion anymore, and that was sad.
Yeah, like Kira really felt, I guess, as you mentioned, it started with the arc where, you know, Rei is just like, well, she can't work, she's just my housewife, you know, like from there on she's just kind of, is she the main character? No. Like, you know, like she's just a doormat basically.
Yeah, I kind of feel like since they introduced like Sei as an artist, we kind of just didn't get more of her as an artist anymore. It became like that was a character trait that connected her and Rei because of Sei, and then it became like,
oh, it's just a plot device.
Yeah, and then it just wasn't important anymore, which is too bad, because the stuff I liked about the series originally was tied up in like the art and the like, he's the racer and she's the artist. Like, that is a fun combo.
That's a fun like dynamic that they had, but yeah, it did not go in those directions, you know?
Yeah, like why isn't she sketching him racing or something? Like,
oh my gosh,
I want her new Mars portrait to be him racing. There.
Yeah. And I actually think that some of the, you know, obviously there's lots of spreads of him like on his motorcycle looking cool or whatever, you know, just like canonical to the manga. But I also think that some of the images that with her that stick out most in my mind are her like, you know, having an emotional moment and like hugging his helmet or something. Just like there was like a lot there that just did not go anywhere. Yeah, with her artistically, you know, like I feel like she had so, it's just sad.
Yeah.
The potential was really, really, really there. I think obviously this is discussing cycles of trauma, but it had too many rotations, as we mentioned. I don't think we need to repeat that, but just too many turtles all the way down is too much.
Yeah, I think if they picked like one direction, like if it was just about the cycles of trauma, and that was like how his trauma was because of his mom, because of, you know, her parent or something like that, and his conflict with his dad was because of like trauma because of his brother dying, like that would have been interesting. But I feel like we had just too much and too many outliers. Like, why was Masao the way Masao was? Like, we didn't really get good answers to that. He seemed to just be a like psychopath, quote unquote, that didn't really get any like explanation, and at least nothing like concrete or nothing that felt like it was helpful, which is fine. Sometimes there isn't an explanation, but like, if they were trying to explore
why was he
that
here then, you know?
Yeah, like what was the point?
Yeah.
I mean, I know he was supposed to be a foil to Rei, but like it just, I don't know. I don't know that it was too many cycles of too many different traumas, I think, is the problem. Like, any one direction, and I think individually were handled fine and sometimes really well, but there were just too many of them.
Yeah, and I think what it says overall about how to break those cycles is not necessarily wrong either, right? Like, we get that moment with Rei's dad, I guess very early on, when Rei is asking for the help, right? And you know, Rei has this perception. So we didn't mention her yet, but like Rei's dad has a secretary who's like secret, quote unquote, secretly his lover or something. Her name is Sonoko, which kept making me think of the gas stations. But anyway, it's not spelled the same, but that's how you would say it. So, okay. Anyway, so, Kira has an interaction with her where Kira asks Sunoko, like, oh, so what is Rei's dad like? And she says something about him being like sad and pitiful, or no, sad and something else to the point of pity.
Yeah, it's like sad and awkward to the point of
Yes,
pity. And I was like,
yes.
what a weird way to describe someone.
It was very like evocative though.
Yeah.
Something, right? You're like, wow, I really felt that in my soul, even when I don't even know this man yet, but like,
yeah.
I feel like I do, versus Rei has an explanation of his dad as being like arrogant and uncaring and, totally different adjectives. And so there's a moment early on where Rei is asking his dad for help in this arc, and Rei is having, because he has his Rei goggles on about his dad being like mean and arrogant and uncaring, and that's kind of the way it comes off in the scene, because it's his dad being like, oh, are you coming to beg me, basically for help, like tell me everything that you'll beg for, and like what you'll give me. He doesn't say all of that, but then, he does end up helping Rei and like trying to make good on all these promises and be a dad. And Rei is just like, you're only doing it because like of ulterior motives, right? Like you don't care about Kira getting an education for Kira's sake. You only care about it because she lives in your house and you need her to have like a fancy degree, right? Like that's kind of the thinking that he's spouting. And his dad is like, why do you twist like sometimes people are just nice.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that is one good lesson of how to get out of cycles. Sometimes people are just nice and you should accept that. That is a good life lesson, actually. Second is like Rei and Kira's relationship, to the point, like they both have different traumas, but when they're with each other, they're not feeding each other's trauma. They are trying to help each other like get over it, right?
Yeah.
And I feel this a bit in my own like personal relationship with Asher. Like kind of the thing that attracted me to Asher is I grew up in this like, working class, middle class Philadelphia like family where like Philadelphia is, kind of rough and tumbly. And I always just have like this cutting wit. It doesn't come through as much in this podcast, I guess, but like normally I just like go for the jugular in any joke I'm gonna make to anybody, and it might be about them and all this stuff. And so I just remember meeting Asher and like playing the same game with him, but he just doesn't feed into it, like he's just like, okay, like other people will make it spiral, right? They'll be like, are you insulting me? And then it like we just keep escalating from there. Whereas Asher is just like, yeah, okay, you said that. Why'd you say that? You don't have to be mean, or like just doesn't even acknowledge, just like brushes it off. And I'm like, what? There are people out there who like don't feed into other people's nonsense, like blew my mind. And I think like Kira and Rei try to do that for each other. And again, they're 17, so they don't do it like perfectly, but that's like kind of the gist that they're trying to get to. And I'm like, that's good. you know?
Yeah, I think so.
So like it had good things, but yeah, just so much. No, too much. Anyway, I think that's most of the main discussion. We had two random thoughts that I think are very funny. One is I just really loved that there was a two-page spread of a Tower Records while Rei was talking about how he's just like, all he is a stupid 17-year-old. Like, I think it was not in relation. I don't know. There were two instances that could have been either in relation to Kira's stepdad and not believing him, but I think it was actually like the business stuff. Like, no, of course, I'm just a stupid 17-year-old or whatever, Yeah. I just thought it was very evocative of a time.
Yeah, there were a couple parts in that later part where he is acknowledging that like he is a teenager, or someone else is having to remind him that he can't actually like do this thing, or doesn't actually have the life experience to deal with this thing. And I thought that was really kind of interesting to see in this type of series where like an adult actually is coming in and being like, look, you actually can't be expected to do all this on your own yet. You actually do need help, but it's not a weakness. You are just actually still a child.
Just 17.
Yeah, you're just 17. It's okay.
we know you've seen things, but it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
I know.
And I think my random thought was that we'd been watching this in the first half, but Tatsuya made it out of the series without revealing any massive trauma or like dark backstory, which I'm good for him. There's one
Good
character.
job, Tatsuya.
Tatsuya
He got a
made it.
motorcycle and he's fine.
Yeah.
He's good. Good job, Tatsuya. That's actually a great transition into discussing Horse with No Name, which is a prequel to the series that does focus on Tatsuya and how he became friends with Rei. And it's told from Tatsuya's perspective. So, a little overview recap of what happens here. Like, they're going into high school. It's their first year of high school, and Tatsuya is kind of excited to have this like reset moment, right? Where he can go vie for being top dog in the class, like all this stuff. But he immediately, of course, gets upstaged by Rei because Rei is just so hot, you know, so hot and cool, rides a motorcycle, like is good at basketball, you know, he's all the classic things.
Yeah.
But he also perceives Rei as being very arrogant, and he like, you know, steals the girlfriend of one of his friends, and he's just like, this guy's, you know, again, an asshole. So he's just like, well, I'm still a better guy. Of course, through the course of the story, he discovers that Rei is a better guy than he thought, than Tatsuya thought, and more diligent and an amazing racer. So Tatsuya like gains respect after the men talk with their fists, you know, as they do.
Yes.
They get into a skirmish and then they go to a bathhouse together. Classic man stuff. But Rei, after they go, they fight each other and they go to the bathhouse. After that, they run into a guy that Rei had beat up the day before, and they get trapped by a biker gang. So Rei gets Tatsuya involved in some trouble. But is a good enough racer and a big enough guy to also get Tatsuya out of the trouble. So Tatsuya is like, respect. Now we're besties for life. You know? And the title of the prequel comes from a song that is included like by name in the story, A Horse with No Name by America, which is from the early 70s. And Tatsuya like heard it on the radio while he was studying for high school entrance exams, but he doesn't know English, and he's always missing the part where they say the name of the song and who it's by. And he's just like, man, I wish I knew what this cool song, like who made this cool song and what it's called. And because Rei had lived in America, you know, prior to coming to high school, he's like, I got you, bro. It's called A Horse with No Name. And it's about a guy who is wandering a desert, like thinking about life or whatever. And you're like, okay. Like,
yeah, that was really funny to me because, like, I know that was a popular song, but I don't think it's had much like lasting popularity.
yeah,
Like, it's not really one that you think, like, the Beatles still come up a lot, and like, you know, Love and Spoonful or something, but like, and I mean, America has done other things. It just seems like a weird pull that, like, in the 90s in Japan, somebody heard that on a radio, which, I mean, you know, probably was true if she put it in the series, sure, but like, it's just such a weird song to like have be your big moment of like building a little short story around. And so it felt very funny to me.
I kind of get it because I don't know. I think about the one time I went to Germany in like the mid 2000s, and definitely like all the radio stations there were playing American music, but from like a decade or two ago.
Oh, interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
And I feel like now we live in a very different time because we live with like mass internet and like
Sure.
Spotify and everything, right? So I feel like it would be different now. But I was like, I guess I understand this. But as you said, like, I was like, do I even know this song? And I've listened to it and I was like, oh, I do know this song. But like, has it ever come up in the past 20 years? For sure.
Yeah, like, I feel like I mainly know the song because I got a little bit into the band America because I found out they did the soundtrack to The Last Unicorn. And so I like listened to their other stuff at one point, but not a lot. And so I'm just like, it just seems like that is their one hit or whatever that people would recognize. But Oh, I don't know. It wasn't going to be my pick for like an iconic 70s song, I guess.
No, for sure. Yeah.
Which is kind of cool in itself, but I also don't really know why, like, thematically, why it was relevant.
I don't know. Before I realized that they were riffing blatantly off of the song, I was like, okay, a horse with no name, like, it's impossible to tame Rei, like, he's a wild stallion. Like, I don't, but then they explain, like, the desert and thinking about life part, and I was like, what did that have to do with this short? So, like, overall, the series, maybe, but like, what did this have to do with the short story in particular?
Yeah, like, the song's all about kind of being alone in the desert, so, like, maybe that's, like, Rei was pushing people away.
Over this song that's about being alone, you know? Like,
yeah, so I don't know, because it seems like the point of the story is finding connections.
yeah.
So I don't know, but
so it's the irony of a song that's about being alone brought them together. But it didn't though. It just came up randomly.
It just wasn't important to Tatsuya, and then Rei knew about it, but I don't know. It felt kind of like a flimsy connection that didn't really need to, and maybe it just didn't need to be elevated to the name of the story, and it wouldn't have been as weird to me if it had just been like a recurring part of the story. It doesn't feel like it encapsulates this little story to me.
No, I was like, okay.
But again, I haven't listened to that song in like years, so maybe there's depths there that I'm missing.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I didn't go look at the lyrics or like listen to it fully before this podcast, so I'm like, I mean, there could have been something more overt that I'm totally.
Yeah, but I feel like
remember.
They couldn't have trusted their audience to know the song necessarily. So if there was something more important, they would have mentioned it in the part where they like were summarizing what the song was. So I think it was just she liked that song. I don't know. Don't want to speculate, I guess. But yeah.
Did you guys know that sometimes when you do art analysis, but then you ask the author why they did it, they're just like, it just seemed cool. It's not like deep.
I do love that.
Yes, that does happen.
It doesn't matter. That's fine. There's what the author meant, and then there's what people can take away.
And then there's what we think of it.
Yeah, exactly. You can. That's the whole death of the author thing. It doesn't matter what the author says. You can still interpret it disconnected from that.
Yeah. You better make good arguments, though. You can't just like pull stuff out your butt.
You can't just make shit up. Yeah.
Anyway, so I think you've already brought up how this prequel space could have been better used. Because I'm like, did this add anything? I don't think so. Yeah,
I mean, it was interesting in that I like Tatsuya, and it was kind of fun to see it from his perspective. But I feel like there are things they could have pulled from that were earlier parts of the story, like we talked about, like maybe Rei's parents or like him and Sei. Like there could have been other things that would have like added more. So that's what it wasn't bad, but I don't think it's bad that it's because it's like not included in the digital release. I don't think, if I'm remembering right.
Ooh,
I think we looked it up at one point, and so I don't think it's horrible that it's not there.
No, you're not really missing anything. And so Lucy and I were emailing back and forth because I was kind of scrambling to finish at the end there, and I was like, at like 3 hours before recording, I was like, I'm still reading A Horse with No Name, and I thought, it's a normal sized volume in the print edition, so I was like, I gotta read this whole volume. I'm only gonna have like an hour to write anything in these show notes. And then I realized that actually it was only like a third of the volume, because the other rest of the volume is to like unrelated short stories stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, I definitely would have been real mad if I paid $10 for this, and that was what it was, Oof.
Yeah, it's one of those things where on the one hand it's nice because we usually don't in America get to see the short stories from authors, so that's kind of a cool way to include it. And I will really quickly summarize them because I did read them, and they're cute. They're similar veins, really. The first one's about a kid who he's a bit of a bad boy, and he's just moved to the school, and he meets a girl who, while seeming kind of like a goody-goody, is on kind of this like weird daredevil streak and keeps like convincing him to do wild things like shoplift and stuff so that they can just like feel alive, basically.
Yeah.
And
So the say of the story, yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, maybe I'll just go full spoilers since we're in the spoiler territory already.
Yeah.
It turns out that she's actually like a girl in a coma, and he's like hanging out with her.
Is she a ghost?
She's
Yes,
like
classic.
basically a ghost. It's great. I do enjoy that. And so like it ends up that he had met her in a hospital because his like, again, this is how it's similar to the whole series we just read.
Yeah.
He like, his friend died in a shoplifting, like he got shot because he stood up against the robbers or whatever. And so main character guy in the short story is feeling lots of like survival's guilt because he didn't do anything to like stop his friend getting shot. He just kind of froze because there were robbers with guns, so understandable. And so he's dealing with that. And then I don't remember why she's in a coma. She was probably in a car accident given the series.
Yeah.
I don't quite remember, but she's like, they may not even tell us how, but she's clearly like coming to the end of the time in which she can stay on life support because everything has failed. And so like there's no coming back from the state she's in. She's like vegetable level. Like there is nothing to happen to her that can heal her. So it's really interesting, and I always like ghosts, so I enjoyed that. And then the second little short is about a girl whose parents are getting divorced, and it's clearly because her father has had an affair, but there's kind of a debate about when the affair started, and she ends up kind of befriending the son of her dad's mistress, and they kind of like, through dealing with this process, are kind of like coming together and like maybe eventually going to be in a relationship, but are mostly just like friends at this point. And it's kind of cute. It reminded me a lot of this series.
Yeah.
where there's a lot of like past trauma, and there's like some interesting twists that they realize that for whatever reason, like the father and the mistress had been together like prior to either of them being born, and then something had gone wrong or whatever, which it reminded me actually a little of Marmalade Boy in that way. And so that's cute, and it really was very much like you need to kind of find a connection to understand what you're coming from, and you know that then you'll kind of, that will help you heal, because she, much like Kira, is kind of very shut down and getting along with friends but feeling really numb inside. And so by meeting this guy who's kind of going through a similar thing, but his parents have been divorced for like a couple years, so he's kind of, well, not completely comfortable with what's currently happening, has dealt with it more, and so it's cute, but like I don't know that either of them like stand on their own that well. So like they do kind of make sense as just more from this author after you finish this series, but they're kind of just like, they very much feel like more of the same thing, but people have slightly different hair.
Yeah. Classic. I don't know. And on the one hand, I feel like lots of authors like write the same thing over and over, trying to figure something out, and I like respect that. I'm like, work through it. But on the other hand, as you said, we got so tired by the end of this.
Yeah. Like I think if I'd read them separately, I would have been like, oh, nice. But after having read all of this, I was just like, yeah, no, I get it. Everything's horrible. Everyone's life, trauma, bad.
Sad.
Yeah. So maybe standalone as short stories, they're fine. I agree that I don't know that this volume needs to keep being retained. Like I understand why if they're not republishing it, like I understand that it doesn't really add anything that we didn't already have.
That's a perfectly sound business decision.
Yeah. Although I mean it would also be a sound business decision to get another like $12 or whatever out of someone for it, and it wouldn't be bad really. Like I don't regret having owned it and read it.
Yeah, but it's fine.
Yeah.
All right, so just to wrap up our discussion on the series here, check in on our couples. So I guess another victim of this back half is that like Harumi and Tatsuya just they're there.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of side progression with our characters here. And again, there's just like a lot more stories of just like that feel like plot devices for everything.
Yeah.
Again, with their friends, there's that one where they have this friend who's like, I want to be a pop star. All of a sudden, named Chica, who we've never heard before, you know, and then she's like, oh, but I got scared off because like my parents didn't want me to submit to the audition, and now I've lost the tape because I bumped into a man that had a similar, you know, generic envelope as me, and we accidentally picked up the wrong envelopes, and now there's only 45 minutes until the tape is due, and I'll never get it back. And Rei is like, follow your dreams, girl. I'm gonna make them happen, right? And it's just like, what? Like, we get Harumi and like Tatsuya rallying around, you know, Chika and Rei and Kira, but it's just like, huh?
Yeah,
what?
It's like Tatsuya has conveniently just bought a motorcycle so Rei can steal it and use it to get this girl's envelope back because the guy is conveniently going to his dad's office for an interview. It's just so convoluted.
Yeah, it's just so convenient and strange and not really character building or like believable. And it's just kind of sad because I feel like Harumi and Tatsuya were like pretty cute, but like they become very struggy by the end.
Yeah, I like them as a couple, but and I think this is kind of common for these series, like they feel like a more realistic teenage couple than the actual couple.
Yes.
Like they're just kind of going through life and having their romance and getting to know each other and having good sex or whatever, but like they're not, you know, having these big fraught moments of emotion and trauma.
Ruminations about life and what it all means.
Yeah, one having to get married and like they're on a more like normal trajectory, which is fine. And it's nice to see them. I still am not over the fact that Harumi like bullied her in that first volume. It's wild. And like
you brought up that scene again and I was like, yeah, wasn't it Harumi that was like gonna break her fingers?
Yeah, it wasn't really, it seemed like a distraction at the time when I was talking about, but yeah, like I kind of can't forget that. And like they kind of drop all of Harumi's like bad girl stuff. Yeah. And I kind of wish that they had just maybe Kira had a different friend or something. But I mean, I like Harumi and Tatsuya just fine, but you're right, we didn't get really any of them in this back half, so it's kind of hard to like make new statements on it. They're just kind of being, and they're gonna graduate and maybe they'll stay together, maybe they won't, and that's fine.
It's fine. That's totally cool. I just wish they hadn't been so like relegated to the side necessarily.
Yeah, I wish I would have liked to see more of them and less of all of the spiral of trauma.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So we got the introduction. We got the stated introduction that Rei's dad / uncle, him and Sonoko are a couple, but did we ever get any scenes with them together?
I don't
maybe
think
like one.
We maybe had scenes, but I think it was when she was like in a very secretary capacity. I don't think we got any like lovey-dovey scenes with them. I would have bought that maybe this was actually just something Rei made up if someone told me that.
But I think there was confirmation at the end that it's like, oh no, that's real. Because his dad is like, give me your children and I'll like raise them.
Yeah, and Rei's idea was like, you and her should adopt a kid. And I was like, no, I agree with that. Or, you know, if Rei and Kira have a kid, then they can adopt that kid or something. But like, it's weird also because like he already adopted 2 children, like essentially.
Yeah.
And he already is having trouble. Like he even says when Rei is like possibly dying in the hospital, he's like, I don't know if I can love him as a son, but I don't want to lose him. And I was like, dude, you have raised him. You don't know if you can love him as a son? What?
I also think that the manga doesn't do well with the tension of like, you know, initially you just think that Rei isn't blood related to this guy at all, and it's like, how could he love something that's not his son? And it's like we didn't go really into the really fraught dynamic of like they are blood related, but that makes it even more complicated because like it's his brother's kid, and so like it's both like he is blood related, he should really care, you know, he's his uncle like biologically, but like it's problematic because his brother had an affair with his wife, and like I just feel like it didn't it didn't grapple with those in any way, actually. And I'm like, what? But they were just laying there.
Yeah.
You know?
I actually have a theory about this, I think. And I mean, this is based on nothing but reading it. You know, I don't know what was intended.
You didn't look
or
up
whatever.
like interviews.
Yeah, I don't know
like
anything.
Other fan theories.
Yeah. But my theory is that they originally intended him to be Rei's real father when we see him in the painting in the beginning, like when he's wanting to buy the painting, that was supposed to be, oh, this is his real dad who will get revealed later once we learn that his dad's not his dad. This is his real dad that will come back later. So I because he looks just like Rei. So I feel like he was supposed to be his real dad, who was, you know, a stranger, not, you know, necessarily a stranger, but like a not brother of his father. And so I feel like they added that, and I don't know, but I would have preferred that, because I agree that it was like, it just felt like too many complications. Like, it's enough that he's adopted, although from what I understand, it is actually pretty realistic that people get adopted like within a family. But
no, that part's fine. I think like there was just levels of both complication, but then also levels of like it making total sense that he did it, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like it wasn't balanced that way, though.
Yeah. So my theory is that originally he was just like the guy Rei's mom had an affair with, who we were supposed to see at some point, because his real dad was kind of a dick, and that was just going to be it. And we were going to get him revealed at some point. And I don't know if that's what they thought. It was certainly what my theory was when I was first reading it, was that this older man who looks just like Rei is his real father, and we'll meet him later, which was kind of true. Though not quite in the same way. But I mean, I like the idea of his dad and Sonoko. Like, it's nice to always see in a show when they are actually like adults having a romance. I kind of appreciate that. Like, yeah. So I mean, she seems to understand him to a level to which we don't ever get, which is kind of interesting. So like, clearly she sees what's going on, and maybe it's because he's opened up to her. Maybe it's just because she's really perceptive and like can read into some of the things he does. Maybe it's kind of both. So I guess I'm pro them as a couple. I wouldn't mind seeing more of them.
I was like, I really feel like I could have used to see more of this adult relationship, and I understand like why we didn't, but also like, I don't know, the manga definitely takes liberties at times with like whose perspective you're in and like why. You know, like,
it's not solidly trapped to like the two main characters. We could see other things, so I don't know.
Or like, you know, while Kira's reading like the suicide note, like we clearly get kind of more in Sei's perspective, like melding them together again. You know, like I was just like, you could have taken this liberty, like at a point.
I mean, that was a choice they made, but yeah, I would have liked to have seen more like, why was she his secretary? Was she always his secretary? Like, where did she come from? How did anything with Rei's dad wind up like this? Like, there's a lot of good stuff laying there. You know? Yeah, like how worried should I be about the power dynamic in their relationship?
Yeah, like
what's up?
I have no idea. On the surface, they seem like good people, so ship it. You know, like that's sure. So in the end, do we support Rei and Kira getting married at the age of 18 and 17?
I mean, it solved their problems, certainly. Like, it made some things easier. I don't know that... I mean, less about them being married. I don't know if I'm fully on board with them as a couple by the end, because she seemed to lose so much in the relationship with him, and he seemed to disrespect her a lot in that mid-arc that we talked about, where, like, he doesn't think she can work, and he doesn't, like, respect her choices, like, with her stepdad, and like
doesn't encourage her to make the art that is supposed to be something that she would learn how to do with her toes, you know? Like,
and like he doesn't respect her enough to tell her what's going on with the motorcycle racing stuff. Like, it just feels like he kept making a big deal about how he was going to be her guardian, which was creepy, even if it's literally true because of their age. Like, if he's 18 and he's married her and she's 17, now he's legally her guardian, but it's creepy.
It's not the way I would have phrased that.
And like they already solved the problem of her not having to live with her stepdad by like Rei's dad kind of stepping in. So like that wasn't really necessary anymore. I don't know that they needed to get married.
Yeah.
And like
it felt very like this is how shoujo manga has to end.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And I mean, they seem like they'll be good together. I hope that she's able to pursue his passions, and I hope he's able to respect also that she's really stressed by his racing. Like, they never really talk about that. She's kind of just supposed to swallow it because he loves it. And like, I'm not saying he shouldn't race, but
Yeah.
like, I wish she would acknowledge that that is stressful for her, and like consider her feelings while he is racing in any way. Like, I don't know. That
yeah, he's just like, stand by me unconditionally, babe.
Yeah, exactly. But you can't work.
but also you can't work because you're a mess.
yeah. Like, I think
the dishes.
Yeah, it's just a little frustrating. And like, in general, I also kind of like, there was just sort of casual sexism throughout, where they were just like, a boy can't possibly buy a couch for his apartment. He needs the girl before he can do that.
Yeah.
Even though she has no money and they got it from like their buddy. Like, it just
yeah. They were like, I don't know, we just found, somebody left a couch and the moving buddy gave it to them.
Yeah, it's just like, no one was concerned with him living in a sparse apartment, but now that there's a girl there, how will she handle it?
Of course.
Like, so it just, there was stuff like that bugged me, and I don't know that Rei fully got like to a point where I could forgive him for some of the sexism and some of the homophobia, but so I don't know. I'm a little conflicted about them as a couple, but I'm glad that they're happy together. I'm glad that they like settled things with their parents on both sides so that they can be happy. I feel a little unfulfilled about Kira's mom though, because like they kind of left it where she understands, like she was still pretty much supporting her daughter leaving because she understands, but she's still stuck with this rapist. Like, I'm kind of concerned for her. So I kind of wish Rei's dad could have somehow helped get her out of the situation also, which, would require her kind of acknowledging more of the situation. But like, if that guy is so controlling with Kira, he's probably just as controlling with her mother in ways we're not seeing or he hasn't revealed yet.
Yeah. It's like rapists don't just like, I don't know, it's not just like, ooh, it's only this one person that I would ever rape. Like, no.
Yeah. So I was a little worried about her mom, and like that we just never came back to that in the end. And I kind of expected that maybe there would be some comeback where her mom did leave him ultimately and was going on her own, and then, and could do it better without having to support a kid, and, was able to kind of get herself out and, could kind of reconcile before they got married or something. But then we just never see her mom again. And that's probably realistic, I'm sure, but people have experienced that. Unfortunately, it was still kind of like, from a story perspective, a little unsatisfying.
It's definitely unsatisfying, especially since it's like a story about how you're supposed to go to the depths of these traumas and still turn out like okay and get out of them to some degree. And it's just like, oh, we didn't allow her to do that. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, if they
can't save them all, Lucy. Can't save them all.
And there's only so much. And God, we did go deep enough on enough people that I don't know if we could have handled the trauma of why her mother was the way she was. Like, maybe I think I've gotten us on topic. As far as shipping, I am cautiously optimistic for the two of them, but I don't know that I fully buy it.
No, I agree. I really think that it's unfortunate that in this back half, like Kira doesn't. And I think it's unfortunate too, because the way that the manga frames it is that we're like finally getting the real Kira, right? Like, because she's not gotten over, but she's facing the trauma that she experienced with her stepfather head on and like moving forward with Rei. And so like this kind of like, the person that she is now is supposed to be the real Kira. And I'm like, oh, but it seems like we took something very, very important from her that helped her get through that trauma before Rei was there, like we just took that away and now she's just a housewife. Like, I don't that ain't it.
Agreed.
I'm like, you cute, but that ain't it.
Yeah, which is nothing to say that there's anything wrong with being a housewife, but like that didn't feel like it was fulfilling her. Like,
goal.
even in the story, she was bored. Like, she didn't want to do that. And he kept being like, you can't get a job. And I was like, girl's doing nothing except cleaning your gross house. Like, let her go work at a, like, 7-Eleven or whatever. It's fine.
Yeah, like, it clearly showed for her it was unfulfilling. So I was just like, okay.
Yeah, like, if she'd been really into it, I don't think I'd be as bothered. But, like, she clearly wasn't.
Yeah, if she was happy, like, fine.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking housewives. I'm just like, she was going to be an artiste and then was bored. I don't feel right. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, Lucy, I think we did it. We talked about Mars. It sure was a manga from the 90s.
It sure was, yes.
It sure was. All right, well, I don't know what I'll have you on for next in like 3 years, but I'm sure it will come up in those 3 years. We'll figure it out.
Yes. I mean, this was very fun, though. I hadn't revisited this since probably high school, maybe college. Probably since whenever the manga finished its run. And I don't know, like, I feel like the nostalgia I have for it is mostly for those early volumes before you get into kind of the trauma cycle that never ends, when it was still a little bit like you weren't numb to all the things they were going through. So I still have kind of a lot of...
they had those quieter moments, right?
Yeah.
They're just sitting there painting stuff, like, cool.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I still have a lot of nostalgia for it. I don't know that I'll revisit it again. I don't know that I'd recommend it to new people. It's so of its era, but the art is gorgeous. Really is. So, like, maybe the first couple volumes, and, like, if you like that kind of, like, melodrama, it's got it. You know, it is fun for that. But I don't know that I would, like... I think I would have more enthusiastically recommended it in high school, and I don't think I would do that now.
This sounds right. This was my first time through it, but I'm like, it was definitely of a time. And if young me had read this, oh my gosh, I would have been so into it. Like, okay, like,
yeah.
Young me loved being this overwrought and like emo and everything. But current me is like, I don't know. It's too much, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, it did at the time fulfill what some of me and my friends needed, like, especially people who had been through harder stuff. Like, it was nice seeing that in comic form and seeing people actually, like, dealing with it and acknowledging it and then, like, getting through it. And I think it's useful for that. I do think it goes just way too melodramatic by the end. Like, I think the first half is a little better, and then it just kind of goes off the deep end. To an extent.
Once you get to Maso, you don't need to be here anymore.
Yeah. Although, if I was reading it like one volume every couple months, I don't know that I might feel better about it. Whereas reading it in like two, binging chunks, it just...
I mean, I definitely, think about this a lot in terms of, obviously not just manga, but like the way that we've made TV now and everything. I'm like, we've kind of diluted the way that these things were supposed to be consumed, or like when they were being made, how they were consumed. And so I'm like, do our gripes just not make any sense? Like, we're not doing the thing that was intended,
Yeah. Like, there is an extent to maybe that the kind of what feels like a unending cycle of the trauma in this was maybe just kind of them coming back to remind you what had happened enough that, like, you understood what was still going on with it. So maybe if you were reading this over years as it was coming out, it would just hit different, whereas this feels very much like you're just kind of being punched so much that, like, you don't remember what it's like to not be punched.
When you read it all within 3 to 4 days, you're like, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so manga's always a struggle because you're like, but I mean, it is a cohesive story in the end. Like, obviously you can go back and read it as one long thing, but I'm like, but it's made in serialization, like, I try to balance those things in my mind for sure.
Yeah.
But Mars is definitely, the early bits are actually genuinely very good, and then it might fall off the rails and you might have to be a certain age or a certain person. That's
I think I would just recommend small increments of it.
Yes. All right, well, that's Mars.
Yay.
Yeah. So thanks for listening to Shojo Tell. Comments, questions, constructive criticism, concerns. Need to tell us how we're very wrong and Mars is awesome, or whatever you want to say, email shojoandtell@gmail.com or leave a comment on the episode's YouTube page. We're at Shojo and Tell on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Tumblr. Lucy, where can people find you and your work on the internet?
So most recently, I've kind of been mostly on Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Threads and Instagram are kind of where I do like book stuff. I've been kind of getting into like cozy fantasy. And then Blue Sky is just kind of more anime stuff. And that's not really by design. That's just kind of how the timelines seem to be working out. So I kind of just following what I see gets response on both. And most of the anime people I know seem to be on Blue Sky and vice versa with Threads and book people. So that's what's happening. I'm on all those places as Lucy in Bookland. And then for the podcast, you can follow CLAMPcast and Wonderland in your podcast apps. Or you can follow us mostly. I think we're on Blue Sky the most at the moment. I try to update basically all the social media places when we have an episode come out, but have not been doing a whole lot of like chatting on there since the slow demise of Twitter. So it's kind of just fragmented.
This is very
and sad.
fair. This is like what's happening with me too. I feel I'm most invested in trying to rebuild what I had on Twitter on Blue Sky, which is where I'm just going to be more responsive if you want to like chat with me or anything.
Yeah.
Versus the other places that I have accounts. Like, I don't think I fully understand Instagram even. Like, what kind of millennial am I? I don't know. A bad one. I don't know.
Yeah, I do like that Threads and Instagram are so connected. So, like, I can post pictures on Instagram and then just kind of, like, random thoughts on Threads, and they kind of connect, sort of.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I personally, not to get all in the weeds here, but I think that what replaces Twitter is not going to be something that's trying to replace Twitter. It's going to be something we haven't thought about yet. So we'll see.
Oh no. I'm terrified, actually.
Yes, that's
anyway.
appropriate.
Not another thing. No. All right. Well, are you excited every time you see a new episode from us? If so, please consider leaving a rating on Apple Podcasts or like hitting that like button on Spotify or whatever Spotify has, hitting, thumbs up on the YouTube pages. This will help the podcast reach more hearts, or at least ears. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next time for My Love Mix-Up, actually with one of my former coworkers who is a romance novelist, actually. So I'm really excited about that one, actually. And I don't want to promise that that's actually the one that's going to come out next. It should be the one that I record next, but it's hard. So I think if it's not that, it will probably be the first 10 volumes of Snow White with the Red Hair, which I will do with Asher, because Asher, like, I think Snow White with the Red Hair is his favorite shoujo manga, certainly. I think he has some of the volumes memorized, at this point. So we're gonna pursue that. Either way, I predict that it will be good stuff. So until then, bye.
Hey, we've got one too, on your back. A plum. I can see it.
I do, really? Are you sure?
Yeah, it's only a little one though.